Late in Grant's first term, a spate of scandals began to emerge among his trusted subordinates, tarnishing the reputation of the hero of Appomattox and turning Grant's name into a synonym for corruption. It seemed to America that the president was asleep at the wheel.
Oh my God, you've got Credit Mobilier, you've got the whiskey ring, you've got people lining their pockets from the federal coffers. Where was Grant? Where was this great general?
I think it's true. Grant didn't know the whiskey rings were going on, the Indian frauds were going on, the Credit Mobilier scandal was going on. There's no evidence that Grant personally profited from any of this stuff, but he also had a rather naive faith in his subordinates. Even though he wasn't personally involved, they put a taint on his administration because, as another president said, the buck stops here.
Despite the scandals, Grant's enduring popularity earned him a decisive re-election in 1872. His second term was marred by an escalation in Southern violence.
Things began to fall apart after Grant was re-elected in 1872. One Southern state after another was recaptured by the Democrats. Violence continued.
During his first term, Grant didn't hesitate to quell violence in the South by sending federal troops. But the political climate of his second term would not allow for such bold executive action. In 1873, an economic depression in the North contributed to a shift in public opinion about the problems of Reconstruction in the South.
People didn't want to hear about it anymore. They didn't want to pay for it anymore. But Americans do have short attention spans. And the idea of an endless occupation of the South, very few people had stomach for it.
So, by 1875, when the governor of Mississippi asked for federal troops to end an outbreak of electoral violence, Grant failed to act.
By the end of his presidency, Grant is sitting by without doing anything as one after another of these Southern governments are basically overthrown by terrorist groups, and Reconstruction is coming to an end.
Reconstruction wasn't Grant's only challenge. Another confounding domestic issue of the day was Indian affairs. Grant came into office hoping to pursue a peace policy towards the Indians.
But it doesn't happen. There is no peace. There is more war.
It was during Grant's second term that George Armstrong Custer and his 7th Cavalry were annihilated by Indians on the banks of the Little Bighorn River. Custer's last stand was the exception. Usually it was the Indians who were massacred.
Tragically, during his administration, conflict not only continued between the Army and the settlers in the West and the Indians, but actually intensified.
In the end, President Grant is remembered more for his magnificent failures than his well-intentioned efforts.
Grant's administration is considered one of the real failed administrations in American history, often ranks right at the bottom.
Ulysses S. Grant's presidential term is often to be considered one of the most corrupt in history, and with good reason, as many major scandals took place during his presidency, one of which, Black Friday. 1869 risk-takers Jim Fisk and Jay Gould attempted to corner the nation's gold market, building a network of corruption all the way to the top, enlisting even the help of President Grant's brother-in-law, and driving the price of gold way, way up, intending to sell everything at an enormous profit. But the president came to realize that his brother-in-law's advice was harming public confidence, and he ordered the immediate sale of $4 million worth of government gold. the price plummeted. Thousands of people suffered financial losses as the conspiracy finally unraveled on what has been dubbed Black Friday. But not before the pair had dragged the entire US economy to the brink of catastrophe. Another Grant-era disgrace was this, the whiskey ring scandal. In the years following the Civil War, federal liquor taxes were raised to extremely high rates to help pay off the cost of the fighting, and it was exposed in 1875 that many distillers were bribing officials in the Department of Treasury. A huge conspiracy among members of his close cabinet, politicians, whiskey distillers, and distributors. When his personal secretary was one of these implicated after the affair, and acquitted after Grant testified to his innocence, it only caused further scandal. Many people at the time speculated that money from these ventures was being funneled into the Republican Party re-election. The frequency of these events led to the term Grantism, a word synonymous with greed and corruption.